reporting. Okay, so this was this one here. So you'll notice it reports what I call stock statistics, statistics at the current point in time. We want to record instead the number that have gotten infected within the past time unit. Okay, so it's running in particular time units. If we put them down here, we'll see model time. How many have gotten infected, say, in the last time unit? Does that make sense? Okay. So what we're going to do is to accumulate this. So there's two ways to do it, and I'll demonstrate each of them here. Okay. So we're opening this up, SAR agent based. We're going to put these in main because they're statistics about the population as a whole. Okay. Now, if you scroll over, and this is a common pattern you'll see in models creating AnyLogic, the state variables, other variables of interest, the population, are often put to the left of the origin, so they don't get in the way of the presentation, which is put to the right. So sometimes when you're running models, you want to scroll over to the left, like by right-clicking, and see what's there. Okay. So how are we going to do this? I outlined two methods. Which of them is nicer is will depend on your perceptions. Okay, the first way, I'm going to have a variable that gets zeroed out periodically. So it's going to be called, I'm dragging a variable in. This is one of the first times I've actually added a variable. And I'm going to call it count accumulated infections in reporting interval. Okay, there we go. I like to use names that don't leave a lot to the imagination. So you read that, and you get a pretty good idea of what it does. Reports the number of accumulated infections that have occurred to this point in the reporting interval. Okay. Okay. So we have, now you can give it a shorter name if you so see fit. Please do not name it X or name it A or name it T. TMP. Foo. Do not name it these things. Okay. Okay, so we're going to periodically zero this. We're going to periodically report this and zero it out again. How do we periodically report something? How do we make something happen periodically? Like every time step exactly. We use a what? An event. An event. So I drag an event over, and this will be called reporting event. Reporting event. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, tell me what the settings should be to make this go off every time unit. So at time 0, at time 1, at time 2. Yeah. Okay, time out, and then what here? With cyclic. Should we make the first time 0 or 1? Well, maybe we'll make it 1. Well, okay, we can make it at 0, but since time is starting at 0, as they say in the US, there ain't nothing that happens before time 0. And so it's a little bit irrelevant. We could start at 1, in which case then we get accumulations. The only problem is that sometimes we really like our statistics to start at a common baseline. So I guess we'll start at 0. First occurrence time 0, recurrence time 1. Let's use that, okay? Without loss of generality. Would people be more interested in seeing it report every time unit or every like week, 7 days? Should we do 7 days? Let's do 7 days. Okay, so recurrence time 7. 7.0. Okay, now this thing is going to have to do two things. What are the two things this is going to have to do every 7 days? Okay, so we have to in some way make sure this value data isn't lost, right? And then we have to zero it out. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to show you two ways of doing this. First, I'm going to start simple, and I'm just going to print this out. How do I print out in AnyLogic? Trace line, yeah. And I'm going to say, count of infections in previous week equals, and I'll put then I put what? The name of, you don't want to say the full name, right? The full name then. By the way, auto-completion is your friend. Maybe the names wouldn't be as big if we didn't have auto-completion around. So you start typing it, and it will fill it out for you, and you just click on it, and it will fill it out. Oh, okay. Help? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's one thing we do, and so we're just going to print this out for now, and we'll assume then that's good enough for saving it away. What do we do now? We have to do what with this? We have to zero it out. Okay? Okay, and now, will this work? If I run this, will this work? Will it report the number of infections that have occurred each successive week? What's missing? No, we haven't sort of recorded them, so that's the key thing. That's the key thing. So where would we go if we wanna increment this when somebody's infected? Where would we do it? Anyone? Where do people get infected? How do we know if someone's infected? What part of the model? State chart of the person. Yeah. Okay, so where in this is there infection occurring? When do we know if a person gets infected? Okay, the infection here. Okay, so this is with transition. Where would we put something that we want to do something when someone gets infected? Where do we put it? Do we put it in the class name? Put it in the guard? Where do we put it? Action. It's the action that occurs when, and you notice it gives you some information, like it has a message for when the message comes in, but we don't actually need that. Okay, so what do we want to do here? Sorry? We have to add one to a variable. In computer science terms, we talk about incrementing a variable. So where does that variable live? Okay, it lives in main. So how are we going to get to it from here? Good. This dot get underbar main. We call that. So this refers to me. It's a reference to me. Call get main gives a reference to the main object, and then I call dot, and I can have this count accumulate. Now, in Java, we could write out, this equals this plus 1. But there's actually a much faster way to do that in Java. Anyone know what the syntax is? Plus plus. Yeah. And there's a slight bit of, so there's some subtleties with the plus plus goes before, after. This is a post increment, but it doesn't matter here because we're not depending on this value directly here. So this is an increment by 1. It's incrementing it by 1. Okay. So put a plus plus, no spaces between them. No spaces between those pluses, and it's good convention not to leave a space between the name and that, although you have latitude to do that. And then there's a semicolon at the end. So let me put this up on the big screen. Here we go. There we go. Now you probably, folks, may not want to type this long name, but what you could do is you could do autocomplete, right? And you do count, and then you press enter, and it fills it out. So be sure, auto-completion is your good friend. Yes? There's times where it didn't work, and I made sure on noted it. there's a few times, actually it's gotten better over the years, but there's times, particularly for statistics, it seems to sometimes get confused about where it is and gives you the wrong thing for autocomplete. It gives you something called packet or whatever. And yeah, that's a little bit of a pain. For the most part, it's pretty good, except I've noticed on my computer when it's under certain conditions where it's displaying on an external screen, like if I'm teaching, so I teach a course that's broadcasted to people around North America, and I've noticed sometimes it doesn't work there, so I have to remember things from memory, which is a good thing to try. Yeah, there are times, and I think one of the gentlemen up here had problems with autocomplete working in certain cases. Is it working now? It is. Okay. So folks, we've just added that. Is there anything else we have to do? We did up in main in the reporting event. This is the code here. I'll put it up on the big screen. It's it's wrapping horribly because of the horribly long name. This is the second statement of it. So we just set the variable to equal 0. So in other words, we reported it, we printed it out, and then we set it to be equal to 0 right after that. So we're done with it, so we print it out. Does that make sense? Does that make sense why that works? This is up in main for the reporting event. Reporting event prints it out, and then it sets it to 0, and it's going to be incremented then. Does that make sense? People? Questions? Anyone need help? So it's just things that have happened within the week. So at the very end of the very end of a week, it reports the stuff, zeroes out all the accumulated, so they'll start afresh accumulating, and then it will go another week, get to the end of that week, it'll report what it is, zero it out, and start. It's like it crosses out the thing of the tally.
If you want monthly report,
then you do 30.5 or whatever. Yeah. So it's just the time between them.
So what I mean is, if you want to accumulate the 12 reports of the previous 4 weeks.
Oh, okay. In addition to this?
Yeah.
Oh, if you want addition to it, you'd probably have one weekly. Here, let's name it so that it's very clear. We probably have a weekly reporting event, and this would be. Then we could name this. I'm not going to name this because there be dragons. But actually, can I show you something pretty nifty about AnyLogic? See this horribly long name? I mean, it's close to my heart, but maybe not to yours. But it says in reporting interval. Maybe I'll say in week. Now watch this. I haven't yet pressed enter. You'll notice that right next to this it says Control Enter to perform refactoring. If I press Control Enter, it will go update wherever this is found, and it will change it to the new name. So it says, okay, this is found at several places. Do I want to change it to this name here? Do I want to change it here to that name as well, etc.? And I'm going to say yes to all of them. And now it's changed the name everywhere it occurred. And then, if I wanted a monthly one, I could have account accumulated infections in month and have a monthly reporting event. Does that make sense to people? Yeah. And in fact, we're going to be doing that in a little bit. But yes, you're absolutely right. You could, if the reporting event for at the higher level is at some regular interval, some regular multiple of the sub intervals, you could do it. It would get potentially a little bit awkward if you have week and month, if the weeks don't fall precisely on the month boundaries and so on. But yes, you can do aggregate up. Okay, so let's run this. Let's run this thing right now, and let's run simulation here, and here we have this thing is initializing. Where's our variable? Okay. We actually can't do this, so we can't scroll over. It's actually shown here. So this is reporting the number of infections in the previous week. Now, this format is not particularly good for exporting. To make it better for exporting, it would be better if weekly reporting event printed out with a tab between them. So how do I encode a tab in Java? Anyone know? \t. It's \t, just like this. So folks, I'm changing it. So the trace ln, instead of saying equals that, it looks instead something like this. So with this \, note the sign of that back. I call it / rather than /. It's not like the slash used for HTTP : / It's the \, the opposite way. Okay. Now that's an indication of a tab, and that tab will mean there's a space there, and that would be nice for exporting to what? To CSV or a tab file or spreadsheet. Okay, so should we run this? Let's run this. Okay, and now we have these things printed out here on the console. It's printing out each successive week, right? Okay, let us go and copy these. I'm artfully weaving in some, well, trying to be artful, weaving in some things from the lecture. So let's copy these. Let's select these, copy, and if you have Excel handy, why don't you go over to Excel and then go paste in it. There we go. So you see these come nicely in a column now. So sure. So what I did is in this reporting event, I had this \t like this. So I used to have something like equals, but now I replaced that with \t, and then I ran it, and I got on the console this sort of thing, and I could simply copy these. Actually, I don't even have to. Well, yeah, I guess I do have to. I could do select all and then copy, and then I went over to Excel, and I just pasted it in. Oh, no, that's a clear console. It clears it like this. So if you had something in the console, this deletes it all. It visually deletes everything in the console. So that little thing, it looks like an Excel icon. It just clears it out in case you've got too much there. You don't want to look at it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So again, Mike is asking about this variable, and it clears it out. Okay. Okay. So that's a way of exporting to Excel, having those tabs in there. Generally, the console is not the best place to output a lot of stuff because you might have other stuff going there, and it's all mixed together. But it's okay for certain needs. Okay. Yes. It is. I haven't done much of that, but Andre described that in terms of you do create cell and then you can write to a cell. Okay, so it is possible to write it into Excel. I'll also show you how you can export to a file on the cheap. I have some code in my lecture that shows how you can do file export to a tab file. Okay, directly from a data set. The data sets are quite nice for supporting that. Okay. Okay, but I would like to explore something. You'll notice this simulation is locked down. So if we go to simulation and we go to window, you'll notice that this does not allow model model navigation. Excuse me, it should be panning. I guess it's under presentation. No. Oh, sorry, enable panning. Here it is. It's under, so if we go to this experiment, the thing that was bothering me is, folks, I wanted to go see these variables, but if I right click, I can't get over to them. I'm right clicking and it's not allowing me to move it over. So if I want to allow it to move it over, or if I want to disable it, the place to go is in the simulation go to the window, and up here at the top there'll be enable panning, enable zoom. See that? So if I do enable panning, now when I run it, this is useful. This is not merely just for fun. If I enable panning here, then I can go over and I can actually look at some of these things, like this count of accumulated. See that? Do you see that for that variable here? So I went over, and if I can actually create a graph of it interactively. So how did I do that? What I did is I clicked on this, and that would show me the current value. And then you see up here, and I apologize it's so small, but do you see this up here? I click on this little thing, it looks like a wiggly line. And then I click on it, and it will start creating for me a interactive graph for this. So this is reporting the number of people infected per week on successive weeks. You'll notice it's going down. So in other words, it's graphing out some of these ones that that I'm getting it to print out. So this is showing me sort of a custom graph, interactively requested. Okay, we got to be a bit careful though, because no, that's right. Yep, this is it's just showing it at the I think it's successive values. Actually, this is, I'm sorry. So this is actually showing it. Some of the values that it's showing are actually occurring between the weekly periods. So it's actually reporting it less than on a weekly duration. So in other words, it's not necessarily the case that it's showing us the successive values it's outputting. It's showing some between that too. So so you have to be a bit careful about that. But you can use that interactive graph fruitfully. You'll notice that associated with each of these variables is something which indicates whether to show it at runtime or not. This one was selected show at runtime. N susceptible was not. Okay. N infectious was not. If we want to show it at runtime, we can click that, and then we can do a run of this, and then we'll actually be able to go see the values for this variable. Can you folks tell me, based on what I've said, can you folks tell me why is this rising? Why is this one rising like this here? Whereas if we do it for this one, it'll be going sort of up and down and up and down. Watch this. This one is rising. This one's going up and down. Why is that? Why is it going up and? It's zeroing it out and accumulating. It's not necessarily showing it for each successive reporting interval. Those are reported down here. This is just accumulating, going upwards. This is kind of going up and down and up and down and up and down. Does that make sense to people? Okay, so this one is, you can do it this way. It's not a terrible way to do it, but it's a little bit maybe not, you know, because the value keeps going up and down and zigzag, gets zeroed out, etc. So there's another way to do it. Can we try this other way? Is that okay, people? Let's try the other way. Okay, let's do it. Let's do way 2. Okay. So I'm gonna save this. So this is with regular with weekly zero-based reporting. Okay. And I'm gonna put this in my classes area. Use classes. Boom. And then I'll put it under Sydney. Where is Sydney? There we go. Okay, so models. Okay, so this next one, folks, I want to do this other way instead. I want to have a variable that gives cumulative number. It's only going to be going up, and now we're going to take differences. So see if someone here might be able to figure this out. I know it's almost flawed, but and probably the idea is not clear to you. But suppose we want to have a variable that accumulates the total number of infections that have occurred thus far. And when we're going to report, instead of zeroing it out every time we report, it just goes up and up and up. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the value of the variable now and subtract it from the variable the last time we reported it. So maybe the last time we reported it was 1,000, now it's 1,100. So we take the difference and it's 100. How would we do that? How would we do that? Store it in another variable. Exactly. Very good. So this count accumulated infections in week, we're not going to use that name anymore. Instead, it's going to be count accumulated infections, thus far. So I'm actually just going to leave out the name. And I'm going to actually do Control Enter and replace everywhere it occurred before. So when I referred to it from the state chart, it's going to fix that. So it's just going to be count accumulated infections. And then there's going to be count accumulated infections at previous reporting point. So I'm going to have a variable called count accumulated infections at previous week. I'll make it specific, previous week, okay? And now we're going to, this is going to successively refer to this. And now we have this weekly reporting event. Okay, so this is an interesting little task, okay? So folks, tell me the logic here. What are we going to report? For the count of infections in the previous week, can you give me the formula we're going to report? What is this going to be? If we have the cumulative infections at the time we reported last time, the previous week, and we have the current one, what do we do to have to accumulate to report the number of infections that have occurred in the last week? Minus it. That's exactly right. Precisely. So we have one minus the other. So here we're taking the difference between the currently accumulated number and the one as of the previous week. Let me put this up on the screen. Well, okay, let's keep the flow going, and then I will summarize it all up on the screen. So we have this thing. So this is the difference between the two of them, right? Okay, and now what part of it, where it used to have this, what do I have instead? Anyone? Okay, so I'm going to delete this, but is this going to work? Where does it get this number of accumulated infections of the previous week? Where does that come from? Sorry? Okay, but somehow, so this here, I mean, let me turn this into full screen mode. This one here is this is unfortunately a slightly confusing thing about Java's overloading with the plus operator there. So this is the difference between the number that were there in the previous week and the number here. But where does this going to come from? Who changes that? Who sets that? Sorry? Yes. And what do we have to do to set that? Yes, exactly. Does that make sense, folks? So each reporting event, we have a certain number of accumulated infections. And suppose we know the one as of a week ago. We subtract the two and report the difference, right? think are people comfortable with that? If it's 1,100 now, it was 1,000 as of a week, we have 100 more. People comfortable with that? And then, so we report that difference, and now we're looking forward to the next week when we've got a report. We have to have this value set up so the next time we report, it knows the previous value. So we assign cone accumulated infections at previous week, that variable to be the current value of it. Because for the next week, the current value is going to be as of the previous week. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'm going to go and set that right now. So that's the final thing that's just going to have to be done. So great point. So at day 7, that very first reporting interval, we need that number of previous week to be set there. So any other comments or questions right now? Does this make sense? We're accumulating a total number of infections to this point, and then we have it as of the previous week, and we're subtracting off the 2 of them. Let's go now finish that final thing. So what's the initial value of previous week? What should this be? 0, exactly. The initial value should be 0 for that, and then this count of accumulated infections also starts at 0. So we're going to have an initial difference between the two that is reported at time 0, which is 0, and then we're going to have successive values reported at time 7, reported at time 14, etc. So this is the difference here between them. Does that make sense? That's one of the more sophisticated pieces of computational thinking. So let me see if I can explain it a little bit more, folks. I'm at week, suppose that I'm at week 0. I have 0 accumulated infections at this point, 0 as of the previous week. So the difference is 0. That's correct, right? No infections have occurred yet. Now I go forward, and now I set the weekly count accumulated infections at previous week to be 0. The accumulated infections at this point. Now I go forward to week 7. Suppose I have 200 infections that have occurred by this point. I take 200 minus 0, the values of the last week, and I report them. Difference of 200, right? And now I set the values, that variable accumulated infections of previous week to be what? To be 200. That's the value as of now. And now I go forward to week 14. And suppose by then there's a total of 500 infections thus far. I subtract 500 minus, I take 500 minus what? 200 to get 300. And I set the value, count accumulated infections of the previous week to be 500. Now I go forward another week, and I have a total of 900 infections. So I report 900 minus 500, and I set the previous one to be 900. In each case, this setting the previous one, I'm doing that because I'm getting ready for, it's like I'm preparing, I'm getting all my preparations in place for my next reporting interval at that point. Does that make sense? I'm setting things up for my next reporting interval. I wish I had a good example here, but maybe it's a little bit like you know, you prepare a meal, you offer a meal, and then you do the dishes, and you get them ready for the next time you're going to need a meal. So those dishes will be ready for you the next time you're going to offer a meal. So you do the meal. You could leave the dishes undone, but then they're not going to be ready for you when you next need them. So this is like doing the dishes so that when the next time comes that you're going to be reporting, the next meal, the dishes are ready. This count accumulated infections the previous week is just waiting for you. Does that make sense? We're setting it up to be ready for reporting in the next interval at this point. In the next interval, what is the current one right now at day 7 will be the value, the current accumulated one at day 7 right now will become the one from the previous week at day 14. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm seeing nodding heads. Anyway, so those are two different ways to be reporting infection. Okay, to reporting infections accumulated. So I hope that's helpful here. So accumulated report. Now, well, I guess I should say, what's the advantage of doing that one? Why do we do that one instead of the other? Well, among other things, let's run this. And one advantage of this is if we scroll over and we look at count accumulated infections, this one, in contrast to the other one, which was going up and down to 0, up and down to 0, up, down, down. Here, this is just going up. It's only rising at this point because the number accumulated are only going up, and it's a little bit easier to understand what's going on in terms of this. So in short, having that sort of either way works for reporting, zeroing it out, starting it again, or doing it in this cumulative way. I slightly prefer the cumulative way because it's I just find it easier to kind of think about. And either one captures it correctly. So here we go. There we go. You could see the bend to it. Okay. So those are some aspects of accumulating flow statistics. I'm going to